G'day folks, welcome to this live stream of Scenario 1, the fight for Kesternich from Wacht Rhein, part of the Grand Operational Simulation series. This is part of my first foray into GOSS. Wacht Rhein is published by Decision Games. There are now close to half a dozen titles in the series. It is, as I've said in my rules primers, it's one of the most complex games I've played. The rulebook, the base game rulebook, is about 80 pages long, and it's heavy. If you are new to GOSS, you're welcome to check out those videos. I just put up an example of play this morning, and I'm continuing this scenario, and I thought I'd do a bit of a live play to kind of show more of what this game offers. Again, just to really re-emphasize that point, it is very, very heavy. It is heavier than OCS. It is heavier than the East Front series. It is, what else is there to compare with? Heavier than A Time for Trumpets. I sort of spoke about how heavy that was. So this is a very complex game. It is operational, principally battalion scale. This series really focuses your attention on the terrain features, and it's probably the main aspect of the game that I'm struggling with thus far, is being mindful. So for example, I've already made some rules errors in the first turn and a half. I didn't realise there was a vantage point here, so when I spotted out of this hex, I forgot to include the modifier. I also accidentally moved in here, which is constricted terrain, I believe it's called, these dotted lines here, which limits my stacking into this hex. That's okay, and up here that is also okay, but this stacking here is illegal. What have I got here? A battalion and a half. So if I just pull back, it's very there you go, this is what's happening as well. This game is very well suited to vassal play. Because of these reasons. So with Vassal, you could easily remove the units and inspect the terrain. Hey Paul, welcome. Yeah, the live came up. I thought I'd capture some of this. So I want to point out as well, Claystone has done some great playthroughs, live plays of the GOSS series, and LBW Strategy Gaming. I'll put links to those in the description. I'll edit the video once I'm done. So LBW Strategy Gaming and Claystone. They're the two channels that I've seen. If there are more, please leave a comment and let me know. If there are more GOSS examples of play online, yeah, please point them out. I'm keen to watch more. Hey James, welcome. So the rule screw-ups, yeah, they're relatively minor. The spotting here should have caused an extra hit on this hex instead of the artillery shift. I'm not going to worry about that. It's just one little modifier. The stacking in here, I've just corrected. What other rules error did I note? The stacking, this is also obstructed terrain, which limits the number of attackers that can attack into that constricted terrain, I think it's called. I keep getting it wrong. So there's dotted, not the roads, but the dotted terrain features that kind of weave around here. They denote that constricted terrain. And only 2 units per attacking hex can attack into this. So that means that I couldn't have attacked with all 3. It doesn't matter anyway, because even if I take the engineers out of that combat, it's still 1-to-1 odds. So that didn't change anything. Removing 1 unit from there wouldn't change anything. I've just pulled back 1 unit there to adhere to stacking limitations in this hex. They're down to a strength of 3 anyway. And I wonder if... yeah, they couldn't move in there either. So maybe if I just push these guys down to there. I think also that I described this as woods. I noticed I was watching through that example. I think this is forest, and I think see, this is going to happen. These cannons are very light and very small. That is a woods hex here. I believe that's forest. So the very light green, very difficult to see, is woods. There's not a lot of woods on this map, and I think we're principally dealing with forest terrain, which does make a difference. It is on a slightly different line on the CRT. So I'm midway through the Allied combat phase. They've already run through their fire support missions. You can see that in the example of play. And I'm now up to the second combat. You can see all these prepared assault markers. They're preparing to assault this main victory location, Kesternich. And the Germans are here in some strength. Now, as I'm learning, I am constantly referring back to the rulebook. I do have my pages set up, so if you hear pages fluttering about in the background, I apologise for that. The rulebook is right next to the microphone that I have set up. There are lots of sheets for this game, so I've got, what have I got set out here? I've got my revised version of the rulebook, 2020. I've got the Wacht Rhein specific rules. You don't need to worry too much about that for these early scenarios. There's not... Was there anything in this specific rulebook that affected this scenario? I don't think so. I've then got principally my charts and tables. This is, what am I looking at here? This is combat strength modifiers, ground assault column shifts table, which I've photocopied from Atlantic War. It's just one sheet that I have hanging around. The second sheet is principally the fire support tables. I showcased this in, I think, the example of play. So there's only really two tables that I'm principally using. There is a big play aid card that comes with the game which covers terrain costs, which I have on hand as well. There's a unit type chart, which I'm not really using too much anymore. That's this type here. This is good for learning the game. It kind of is effectively part of the rule book, and I don't really need that so much anymore. So really we're just looking at two sheets, the rule book. Oh, and of course the combat results table, which I have over to my right. Okay, so we're up to the combat phase. I flick to the relevant part of the rulebook. I've done fire support missions. I am up to ground assault. I'm identifying a defender's hex as this objective here. You'll notice that is under an artillery shift marker, that spade icon. If you guys have got any questions, I'm watching, keep an eye on the chat. I can't type because I'm a couple of meters away from the computer, but I can certainly respond verbally to any questions you've got about this. So by all means, ask away. Paul's been commenting about how this is similar to the old SBI games. This is in fact, so the GOSS series was redesigned based, I think, principally on Atlantic War. So they took the rules from SBI's Atlantic War, 1978 from memory, and basically sought to revise it. And in the process of revising those rules, they, as someone has said, they threw the kitchen sink at it. And they added a whole heap of new rules. They revised combat, they revised supply, they revised artillery. So you'll see elements of that old SPI series in GOSS, but it's much, much more complicated. The terrain features in particular. So one of the main criticisms many people have made of the old Atlantic War is that it's just a flood of bocage. There's bocage and there's clear terrain, and there's not much in between. As you can see here, just in this small area of the map, we're dealing with a lot of different terrain features, and there are very subtle distinctions between the terrain features. You can see, for example, clear terrain, rough terrain, constricted terrain. You've got several different types of roads, at least 3 different types of roads, trails, and so forth. You've got several different types of urban concentrations. You've got very small villages, which are the sort of the white dots. You've got the red dots. You can see 2 different ones here, and then you've got the larger towns, which you can't quite see in this view, but there's Rotgen just up to the top left, just off camera. If I can just pan up a bit, yeah, it's still not going to feature. It's just there. So yeah, many different types of terrain features, and the distinction is pretty important. As I said, the difference even between woods and forests is substantial, and it affects things like artillery, your movement halts, whether or not that terrain is maneuver covering terrain, and things like that. So I'll try and sort of digress and talk about sort of certain features of the rules as I go along. But as I said, I'm attacking, I'm determining my ground assault value. None of these units are fatigued, they are not attacking across a river, so they don't... The first thing you do is kind of determine strength modifiers, which may halve your attacking units. Nothing applies there. Similar for defending units. If they have a concentration of artillery, or it's a night turn, or pure armoured fighting vehicles, you'd halve their defensive strength. That doesn't apply. From there, we go straight to ratio determination, and this is going to be tricky because I'm looking at 3 stacks against another big stack with some losses. So let's work out the defenders. First of all, defense of 5. You'll see that spade symbol, that denotes a step loss on the unit above it. So they're a step loss, so they are down to 7.5, rounded up to 8, and then 9, 10. So we have defense of 10 in this hex. Right, so it's a pretty relatively strong hex. Attacking that, it's an easy one to remember. We have, these guys have already taken a step loss. I'm pretty sure that's a step loss marker. So they're down to 3, 7. We have 10, so 17, 20, 25, 29. We were just short of the 3-1. So we're looking at 2-1 base combat odds against that hex. 2-1 base. The next step is to work out column shifts, and column shifts come from another range of sources. They come from units being in PA mode. So because these are prepared assault, we go up to 3-1. For each attacker shift marker on the defending hexes, another column shift, we go up to 4-1. One thing that I missed was to determine the defensive terrain. So in this particular hex, we have a rough, and we have rough terrain, clear, and a village. Now, the defender basically looks at the terrain chart. Rough terrain, rough and village, they're both on line 2, so it doesn't really matter what they use in terms of the line that combat takes place on. What they might want to consider is the terrain modifiers to armour. So at rough terrain, there's a -1 AT modifier. In a village, it's exactly the same. So let's just say they're defending in that village, which will use line 2 of the CRT, and will provide a -1 AT modifier. I'll talk about that in a moment. Don't worry, that probably won't make sense to many of you. So we have 4-1 shift. The defender's not overstacked. What else? Nothing else really applies here to attacker column shifts. For defender column shifts, supporting hexes. Okay, so we have adjacent defenders. Each friendly occupied hex adjacent to any enemy attacking units provide this column shift. So these guys here haven't been attacked yet. They haven't been used to boost any other attacks yet, which means that they can kind of provide fire. I don't want to call it fire support because there are rules for fire support. Let's call it combat support for those defenders. Each such hex provides a shift. So we go from 4-1 because of these adjacent defenders down to 3-1. That's a defender beneficial shift. There's no defensive work, so the engineers, we don't have to worry about engineers, we don't have to worry about commandos. So our final column is 3-1 on what's called line 2. All right, so let me show you the CRT. So if I talk about, you can know what I'm talking about when I talk about line 2. You can see up here the terrain features. We're looking at rough villages in the same area. Okay, they're line 2. What that means is we go to line 2 here and we find 3-1. It's nice that we're in this right-hand side. I spoke about this in the the example of play or the rules primer, about how if you can get to the right-hand side of this line, these results to the right generally benefit the attacker slightly more. Results to the left of the line are slightly more beneficial to the defender. The further right you go, obviously the better. So we're looking at this column here. All right, we'll return to that in a moment. Now that we're on that line, we determine our dice roll modifiers for the combat die rolls. And again, there are very many varied modifiers that may apply. First thing we need to think about is proficiency rating. Now, I need to pick a lead unit, and I have 2 strong units here. I'm going to pick these guys to say for simplicity that I pick the unit down the bottom with a proficiency rating of 6. The defenders should have a proficiency rating of 6 as well. I don't think they have anything higher than that. Yep, so we're looking at 6 on 6 proficiency rating. There is no difference between the two, so nobody gets a bonus as a result. We do, I suppose, have to pick a lead unit for the Germans because that'll be the first, and we'll pick this battalion down the bottom here, the 1st 980th. So we're looking at bottom unit here as the lead units on either side. There's no combat reserve. Combat reserve is basically where you can designate units kind of behind the lines to serve as a combat reserve. In fact, I could have placed them in combat reserve to help out with that. Because I overstacked, I think I can designate them as a combat reserve. I may as well actually. So again, because I made an error with overstacking, in hindsight I'll place them as a combat reserve. And this gives me, each unit with a combat reserve marker awards 1 to be eligible. They must be subordinate within 3 hexes. Yeah, this is the first time I've used combat reserve. I think that's all legal. Hey Peter, where is Australia does Wise Guy live? Maybe a 2-player game could eventually. I'm up in New England, Peter. Are you down the central coast, I think? I think I replied to your message the other day, I think. Okay, so I'm going to count this combat reserve. It's a bit of hindsight because I made that error of overstacking earlier and I pulled them back. Let's say they've come back into a combat reserve. Trying to correct that error I made. So 1 bonus, it's called 1 bonus for the combat reserve. We now calculate regimental integrity bonus, and basically does any participating unit have, yep, so we have here the 309th Regiment participating from here, and they have an adjacent unit of the same regiment operating nearby. So the attacker can receive these regimental bonuses for up to 2 regiments. The defender can receive it from 1 regiment. I don't think the defenders, though, have. So, for example, we don't have... Got the Fusiliers here, but... Oh, 982. Do we have anyone from the 980th? That's 980th, and that is 980th. So, no, we don't have the same regiment nearby. So, I'm just clarifying the eligibility here. For each eligible unit in defending hex or adjacent to, I think, it's participating units. So, 310 and 310. So we have a regimental bonus here. I don't think for the defender it's nearby, adjacent. For the attacker, I think it's regiments participating in the attack. I hope I'm interpreting that correctly. So what that means is now a regimental integrity bonus for the attackers, not for the defenders. Combined with their combat reserve, that's now 2 bonuses. The other principal source of dice roll modifiers is AT, or armour. Now you can see here we've got a couple of M4 companies. They bring an armour factor of 4. You can see they've got their attack strength of 4, and superscripted next to that is what's called their armour value, and that is 4. Unfortunately, we're dealing with some strong German AT, which has an AT value of 4. You can see next to their defense value of 2 is the superscripted 4. That's their AT. Now, when you're dealing with armor versus an equal AT, you stop and you don't award a bonus to either side. If one or the other was lower, you can look through my example of play where I demonstrated what happens with armor. You factor in the differential, you reduce that based on the terrain modifier up to the terrain maximum to apply bonuses. So it doesn't apply here. We're stuck with the 2 bonuses for the allies. There are no more bonuses that apply. So the 2 bonuses, what does that mean? Each bonus in these circumstances equates to a +5 dice roll modifier. The lone combat must... Yeah, it was, Paul. The last combat was just in that last 5 minutes. It was just this combat down here. It was a bit of a stalemate, nothing, a couple of losses on both sides. I think the Allies actually suffered most here because this was not a particularly strong hex and they suffered some fatigue as a result. So we're looking now, just to recap, 3-1 on line 3 with a +10 10 modifier. Positive modifiers benefit the attacker. The next thing to do is roll the dice. Now you roll, and I'll try to show you what we're looking at here. We're looking at 3 to 1 here. Line 3, so this column here, we roll first for the attacker result and then for the defender result. But we apply in fact, I'm just going to double check that. I think the attacking player applies their results. And I have been treating this as they apply the steps, the losses to their results first. Does it mean, but I think maybe I'm misunderstanding that. So the rules say for applying the results, the attacking player, then the defending player applies their determined combat results. Each player follows a sequence. Does that mean that the attacking player resolves their die roll affecting the defender, or does it mean the attacking player suffers their losses first? I think it means that, I think I've been playing this wrong in the example, I think it means that the attacker actually resolves their die roll first and the defender takes hits first, followed by the attacker. That's kind of the case for most games, isn't it? So column 3, it's a D100 system, so I'm rolling 2 dice, black dice first. I get a result of 40 plus those 10 for bonuses gives me a net result of 50 on column 3, 3 to 1. 50 is right between 40 and 60. So I look at here, I go right to the end, and it's a 2 discretionary hits result. That's not great. 40, 2 discretionary hits. Okay. What do 2 discretionary hits mean? I'll do the defender combat in just a moment. I think it's easier to do one at a time. Okay, discretionary hits can be resolved in different ways. They can be, the defender can try to hold their position. Mandatory hits, you basically suffer as step losses. Discretionary hits, you can suffer step losses, you can retreat. The defender can choose to hold their position, conduct a limited retreat, or conduct a full retreat. Because this is the Vital VP Hex, they want to attempt to hold their position. What that means is they must make a proficiency rating check using the defensive proficiency rating of the worst unit in the stack. We have a pretty good stack though, 6, 6, and 6. So a proficiency rating is basically a D10 roll. Ooh, it's a failure. You need to roll less than your proficiency rating. Failure means, I'm going to read the rules here because it's quite procedural. All friendly participating units must retreat. The owner must retreat 1 hex for each discretionary hit up to the unit's maximum retreat distance. And now these are leg units, so they have a maximum retreat distance of 2. They must retreat 2 hexes if possible, and they must follow retreat path priorities. Now this means they want to retreat along roads 1, 2, but there are stacking limitations along that road. What are we dealing with here? We're dealing with that's down to company size. They're still a full. They're a company. It's telling me a battalion and 2 companies. I need to refresh my memory of stacking in this obstructed terrain. This is where the game gets particularly complicated when you got to. So I have to follow these retreat priorities. I'm trying to work out the sequence for failing this PRC, and it runs over basically half a page. But I've got to adhere to constricted terrain stacking, which is somewhere else in the rulebook. I think that's it. I can retreat 2 hexes, have to follow the roads as a priority. Okay, any battalion and 1 engineer company or 1 anti-tank company, plus any non-battalion sized unit. Okay, so it's fairly loose. I can have any battalion, 1 AT company, plus any non-battalion sized unit. I think I have that, so they're fine to retreat into that hex. Because I've got 1 battalion, a non-battalion size unit, because they're down to company size, 1 step, plus my AT company. And they're following that road as a priority to pull back to there. And that satisfies their discretionary hits. Hey GT Pony Rider, yeah, I tell you what, BCS is a lot smoother than this. Much faster. How far into this am I? A couple of minutes in and I'm still resolving the first combat. Whereas BCS, is resolved with a single die roll, pretty much. Alright, so now that's the attacker result. Now we have to roll for the defender. Same idea, they roll 2 dice. They roll a 17, which will push up to 27 with that plus 10. So let's have a look now. So same CRT, but now we're looking at the bottom half of this. We look at 3 to 1, 17, puts us between 12, no, what did I say, 12, 17 plus 10, 27. We're looking at the 20 column, and it's an asterisk and 1 mandatory. Ouch. Okay, the asterisk means a proficiency rating check with the lead unit. They fail that. What does that mean? I think that means another discretionary hit. So we suffer a step loss on that lead unit. They're already down to 2 steps. What that means is we put that under them to show they're down to a 1-step unit. And we have a discretionary hit to resolve. And I need to think about how I resolve that. Okay, check for if all friendly units are recon, no. Discretionary hits. Here we go. They're going to attempt to hold, limited retreat, full retreat. They want to hold their position. So that they've failed their proficiency rating check, which means they have to then resolve 1 discretionary hit. They want to hold their position. So we do another proficiency rating check using the lowest proficiency rating among all participating units. I think, and it'll be a defensive. Is it a defensive? No, they use their offensive PR. That is a 6, 6, 6. I don't think there's anything lower than a 6. So I need a low roll, and I fail. They fail that, which means I think they all retreat 1 hex. So the Americans pulling away as well. And well, they'll be. Let's follow the retreat priorities. Into a hex containing CT, which I think is constricted terrain. Covering terrain, sorry. Well, that doesn't have covering terrain. That does. So I think they're allowed to retreat into there. And they miss that opportunity to capture Kesternich. Okay, yeah, Paul's noting layers and layers upon layer. Fortunately, somewhere along the line, the thing becomes a second nature sort of. Yeah, I'm gradually piecing together the combat. It's this combination of combat, stacking, retreat, and movement. It's just the combination of the 3. All just for 1 combat. Okay, so that is, look, there's no advance because the attacker had to retreat. That pretty much brings us to the end of the US turn. The last thing we do is remove, oops, bump that, is remove those attacker shift artillery shift markers. Right, so they only last for that combat. The final step in this special sequence of play is the administrative phase, and this is where friendly units can remove those fatigue markers. And, of course, we remove the prepared assault markers. Probably doing this out of order. Let me double check. Remove. When are they removed, actually? Ground assault, administrative phase, fatigue recovery. I don't know when prepared assault markers are removed. Fatigue markers are removed in the admin phase. Artillery shift markers are removed at the end of the combat phase. When are prepared assault markers removed? I assume it's at the end of combat. But I can't recall where I've read it. Oh, clear that out. Okay, reported and removed, that should be gone. Alright, I don't know when prepared assault markers are actually removed. It's something I can't recall reading. Mode, greater support and coordination. Do they remain in prepared assault mode? Maybe they do. Until the next mode designation. I can't quite see it in the combat section. I can't see it in the administrative section over. I assume maybe they stay in prepared assault mode until the next turn. Alright, so we're up to the German turn now. Start of the German turn, they set their mode determination. Now they don't want to attack. They are pretty low on strength. They just want to get in there and defend. It'd be great for them also to push into this constricted terrain hex and try and push the allies, make it more difficult for the allies. They. Okay, we can head back. I think we'll just push back how we were. So we'll push one hex into there. That is constricted terrain, so I've got to be careful again. Move that unit in. And I'm going to pull these guys. What am I going to do? I might... I don't really know what to do. These very small company Fusiliers. I think I can move them in there as well. No, let me double check the rules for constricted terrain yet again. What did I say? One AT company. That's not an AT company. That's a armed fighting vehicle company. So I don't think any battalion, right? So I've got one strong infantry battalion there. It's not an anti-tank company. Plus, any non-battalion size unit plus any non-battalion size movement. So you can have a lot. That's weird. I don't know why it's broken down like that. I'm pretty sure I can have those units in that constricted terrain. I'm not 100% certain of that. I feel I could be misreading the rules. It basically says any battalion size unit plus any non-battalion size plus any non-battalion size. And the last two there, the two on top, are both non-battalion size units. So I think they can stack in there. I think. What I'm trying to do there is just keep these Americans up here at bay. The Germans also have, so that's their movement phase. They've skipped their construction phase because they've moved up. We now have their combat phase. Now, they don't want to engage in any ground assault. They do, however, want to use their 8 abstracted barrage points in this scenario to hit the Americans. And I think we're going to hit them out here because they're pretty weak and vulnerable out on the southern flank. If they can stop them capturing this, we can stop them winning scenario. They need to capture, the Americans need to capture both of these hexes to win. And I'm going to try and punish them here. So we're going to have 8, and this is very abstracted. We don't have to worry about where the artillery is or range. It's just like 8 barrage factors targeting here. We have the spotter here. They are not in advantage points, so there's no benefit there. But they can see, the defenders are in advantage point as well. Got to remember that. So we go to the fire support section of the rules now, and I'm kind of getting the hang of these artillery rules, particularly when it's abstracted in this way. There's not a great deal to have to worry about. I basically designate my spotter, which I've done. I designate the target hex here. I designate mission units, again, abstracted 8 barrage factors. I don't have to worry about range requirements. Mission die roll modifiers. So 8 barrage factors, 1 volley, 1 mission. What do we got here? What are the Americans in? They are in forest, hex, no defensive works. So we look at the fire support die roll modifiers. A forest confers a -1 dice roll modifier. We also have, though, armour in the target hex. Now this is a mixed target because I have both an army unit somewhere down there and an infantry unit. So my understanding, if I understand this right, is that this confers another -2 dice roll modifier for a total of -3. Unit density is another factor. So how many steps do I have here in total? We've got 1 for them guys, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, which is a +1 negative modifier, which brings us back up to -2, and that's it. So we're looking at -2. No other modifiers that I think apply. -2 plus 8, so we're looking at 6 plus the die roll. 6 plus 5 is a result of 11, which is an armor shift and 1 hit. Okay. Now, it's one numerical hit. When you're doing fire support like this, artillery, you can either take a step loss or as a retreat. Now these guys have already been hit pretty hard, and they're only, if they retreat 1 hex, it won't be so bad. So I'm going to try to take this as a retreat. I follow certain procedures. 11.6.2 A B. 11.6.2 B. I remove any designation from the target unit. So I remove, I think, their prepared assault designation. They suffer another artillery shift hit. I treat all target units 1 hex. I subtract 1 numerical hit from the result and divide remaining numerical hits by 2. There are no more remaining numerical hits, so that's basically it. After that fire support mission, I can advance. So what this means is that the Germans could, if they want to, advance into that hex, but they're in this good defensive terrain where they are. They're defending that objective hex. Jeez. They will stay right where they are. Clean up these stacks. So those, again, if there was additional ground combat and there are German units adjacent to this, those 2 artillery shifts would really hurt the Americans, but as it stands, it wouldn't really hurt, but it might hurt a little bit. Look, you can see these guys here, they're not really attack capable. So they're not going to advance, they're just going to hold that ground. End of the combat phase, we remove those shifts. They didn't do a great deal to the Americans, to be honest. Just kind of pushed them away a little bit. We're hoping for a better die roll, I guess. A little bit higher than that would have caused some more hits. That then brings us to the German administrative phase. Nothing really to adjust here, no fatigue, nothing to worry about. And that's the end of the second turn. So, yeah, it's tough going for the Americans. Hopefully, I'm going to round it off here, folks, but hopefully it gives you a sense of, again, some more detail on GOSS. This is where I'm at. This is the southern perimeter of the scenario. So it's a very focused scenario, trying to capture these 2 hexes. The Americans got off to a really good start, and they inflicted some heavy losses on the Germans in their initial assault. The Germans then get to bring up their reinforcements who are down here somewhere, which boosts those stacks, and they kind of consolidate into, you can see the big stack here and the not so great stack here. Maybe we should have boosted that a bit more. There's still three steps of defenders here. And we've found the Americans now in that second turn really struggling to get through. Their artillery not having as much impact. Their first artillery die rolls were pretty strong in that first turn. Geez, yeah. Going to have to, I think, maneuver and just keep hitting the Germans. You can see they're a strong battalion with some armour. Another company, so we've got 5 steps in that hex, and then the AT there, which is really tough to deal with, negates basically the American armour superiority when they're attacking Kesternich. This is weak. This is the weak hex. Only got a defense of 7, sorry. But then, this is not a great. We're bringing basically 10 combat factors in attack against 7. We need maybe a stronger attack here. I think there are still 2 more turns to go. I think this is a 4-turn scenario. I'll need to double check that. Yeah, so we'll keep plodding away. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Take care, and we'll catch you all later.